Welcome to the PDX files. Each week we dive into the weird and the unexplained here in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. My name is Peej.
And I'm Mac.
And Mac, looks like we're keeping it local
We
today by
are.
talking about, I guess, what should we call this? Ghost hunting 101?
I think so. I mean, there's certain things that you got to do as a serious ghost hunter. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. I mean, there are
Seems like a
things that if you,
misnomer, yeah.
but I mean, I think that you and I and a lot of other rational-minded folks kind of believe in the idea that there's something more beyond just this, which I hope so, because this isn't always that good. Let's just say that. So we're looking for other reasons to kind of hope, but also there's tons of like cultural again, the same with UAPs, and looking at other different types of paranormal or even true crime stories. There's always a sliver of truth. Where the smoke, there's certainly fire. So I think for us, just sort of our brief story of kind of how we got into this idea, and also just some things that maybe you should think about before doing it.
Absolutely. Well, I think, for those of you who have been listening to us from the beginning, you probably heard us reference once or twice about our past paranormal investigations, or at least being in that field. And so maybe we'll start with that, Mac. How did you get into the ghost hunting when we were actively doing that
Yeah, I
before?
mean, I kind of go back to when I was a kid. Like, I always wish that I could have seen things. I was always interested in the subject, certainly as a kid. But when certainly when ghost hunters came about the very first time
The TV
back in
show.
the early 2000s to mid 2000s ish, maybe, and they came back, they went off and they came back again, different iterations and spin-offs, but certainly the original, which you look at some of those episodes now and they still can't be disproved. So certain things like that where they really do their best to try to use a scientific method to try to determine whether or not there is something there, and also with the idea of, hey, it does not give the people who are experiencing that a reason why it's not. It's like, hey, there are all sorts of reasons why you might be experiencing this. This is what we know based on the science available, and so it's not just about proving life after death. It's about, like, trying to help people, and some of them you can't, like, they're going to believe whatever they want to believe, but try to do our best to provide alternate explanations, which is why I appreciate it about ghost hunters.
So Ghost Hunters, the TV show, started things off for you in terms of your interest in ghost hunting.
Not well as it is today. I mean, I've always like wanted to be able to do something like that, but I didn't know how to do it. Right. So it took folks like them to sort of kick it off. But I mean, definitely been at the forefront of my wants and beliefs to try to find out, as I think everybody does, if there's life after death.
Well, for me, certainly, I think parallels what you're talking about in terms of an interest in finding out whether there's anything beyond this existence. Obviously, it started out for me more from a religious, with a religious lens, and then at some point, evolved into just, hey, what is there something, and can it? What's the explanation behind it? What's the story behind it? And that level of curiosity just kind of, blossomed over the years, and then I happened upon. And this kind of, I don't know if I believe I told you this story, but I just happened upon this meetup. If people are familiar with that website or that social media app meetup, where you can just look at what things that are happening in your neighborhood or in your city, and you just kind of like, hey, I've got nothing to do on that day at that time. I'm going to see if I can just kind of join these group of strangers in whatever activity it was, and it happened to be a local paranormal investigation team that was having a meetup at, I think, one of the supposedly haunted locations here in Portland, which is the Old Town Pizza,
Oh
which
yeah,
which I
that's
don't
right.
even think
Yeah.
it exists anymore. But so
Mm.
obviously, so that was where the meetup was, and that actually started my ghost hunting journey, like for real. Like, it wasn't anything. It went beyond um, the Ghost Hunter show because I also did watch that show before I ended up being in a, you know, for some reason ended up being in a paranormal investigation team. And so I had my, my notions of what to do and what not to do, and certainly had some reality checks when I joined that local paranormal investigation group. That I think then that I ended up inviting you and a couple of other people to join.
Yeah, and I think I was the only one that really well, other than your other friends from
Yeah,
the company that you work for, but, um, again, you kinda have to have the mindset for it. It's not and we both met some, folks who sort of subscribe to, full on 100% belief in anything that comes their way, and you kinda get, across that, and I think that's one of the things I would say for 101 for ghost hunting is, don't believe everything you hear, take everything with a grain of salt, certainly, and look at tried and true methods that might get you to where you wanna be as far as an actual legitimate investigator, not just some crackpot who believes in like whatever, right? So sort of establish your principles. I guess that would be the first thing.
yeah, I would
And
say, yeah,
right?
I would agree with that. I mean, because there's ghost tours that people just enjoy the spectacle and maybe the fright that they get out of it or whatnot. And then there's paranormal investigations, which is, you'd already described a little bit earlier, where, there's a team of people. I mean, we certainly were kind of, we can describe ourselves as such as well, where we came into everything with like a healthy amount of skepticism,
Yep.
and we were trying to do everything that we can based on science, and we had tools and equipment and methodologies that, I believe even to this day that I think lean towards that scientific method.
Yep. And through those tools, and eventually we get to that point that within the show, we actually have seen and experienced some very interesting things that cannot be explained. It doesn't mean it's like proof of anything, right?
Right.
But it's certainly some things where it's going to lead people to believe that they saw what we saw, and experienced what we experienced. Like that's not normal and can't be explained, despite our best abilities to do so. And again, we're not experts; we're just regular dudes, kind of doing our thing. But and even beyond just ghost hunters, trying to look at it everything from that perspective of like, as you said, like the skeptic mindset, but being accepting of things that you can't explain. And I think that's the difference between a skeptic and someone who's a full believer. Is like we're right in the middle. It's like we're willing to accept both, right? And having the open mind, I think, is critical.
Right. And and I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier about we did have folks in the team in the first iteration of the group that were I think their hearts were in the right place, but they didn't really subscribe
Yeah.
fully to the methodology, and so I think they were very some of them were very quick to to see a swaying curtain and think that that was paranormal versus the likely the obvious reason being that there's a wind blew by or something, but
Yeah, they're looking for reasons to try to make it happen. I mean, and you and I went to a few places that had every expectation of having something happen. Like I
right,
think the one was
right,
like a nursing home or
yeah,
a closed down nursing home. It was a creepy ass place. There's no doubt about that. But once you get it past, it's dark and there's some like weird noises that happens in a place that's broken down is like, it's not really operational anymore. Like,
right,
yeah, that's bullshit. But when you can get the hits off of a tool like a K2 meter that you can use to measure the electromagnetic strength in a particular area that you're in. And we always do that beforehand. Is we would case an area. We would definitely look at every place that we can find and find where those spikes might be, right? And some of them could be upstairs near a plug. It could be near some cable attachments. I don't know that they do that much anymore, but with all the wireless stuff. But back in those days, and then looking down in a basement area, certainly you want to look around where there's a lot of wires and exposed wires, certainly, and look for that kind of thing called a Faraday cage, right? You want to look for those types of places where electromagnetic energy can affect. It can actually cause paranormal activity, but also can just cause like mental effects as well. So
Yeah,
feeling like there's something on watching you, or anxiety and things of that nature.
yeah,
It's it's all real.
yeah, it can induce a physiological reaction.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, yeah, in terms of like, again, from a ghost hunting 101 type of lens, when a team goes into the location that's being investigated, the first thing we do is do a baseline reading, and one of those tools, like Max said, is a K2 meter, and that's just to again establish what's normal, so that during the investigation, if there are any spikes in the measurements of that's shown on the K2 meter in any particular spot, it's something that could be noted, right? Like
right.
what condition changed in order to all of a sudden have a spike in the electromagnetic field in a particular spot that had maybe had low or no EMF readings during the baseline reading.
Yeah, and again, kind of going down to that basement example, but it could be anywhere inside the house where there is the potential to have that kind of exposure. You're going to find that on the K2 meter. You're going to be able to see that baseline. So if it's only around certain areas, and then you get a blip, it's like, okay, that's probably because of that. But if
Right,
it's another area that you've already like tested, you've already ran through, and it's interactive, there's all sorts of ways to sort of look at that. But it's more likely that it's unusual and not as easily explained. So it doesn't mean it's
right.
proof, but it
I mean,
definitely means that there could be something there.
actually, absolutely. And we do walk around, the entire, location, but definitely uh, specifically go to the places or the spots that the client claims to have, experienced paranormal activity, whether, one time or multiple times. But yeah, but that baseline reading is kind of a good kind of ghost hunting 101, just to
Well,
establish a mean.
absolutely. You have to do that so that you can actually then try to measure things from again, that scientific mindset. But also you have to look at the client themselves, right?
Yep.
And really, you can do an interview with somebody, and then you can do kind of like a walkthrough with somebody, and then you ask them the questions, right? And then you want to look, you be very observant about it, because I know you and I have seen certain places where it's been dubious at best as to whether there's anything going on there. You sort of learn that through the interview process. But at the same time, it's sometimes worth it to go through the investigation to try to help people, because they kind of have that trust in us. They brought them in. They brought us into their homes.
Right.
They're trusting us and our expertise, which that also might be dubious. But I mean, I think that again, we have the right mindset in place. We're pretty smart people, and but you're going to notice things. So you want to look around at what they have on their bookcase, right? You want to look around at what they may have in their kitchens, or in certain areas. Like I've seen certain medications, certain books, certain things that would lean towards, I guess, a poisoning of the well if you're in a certain home.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that those are the reasons for,
Right.
for something. I mean, a healthy belief in whatever the possibilities are that are out there is fine.
That's good. Yeah.
And, and again, that's why, a proper investigation is good to either prove that something is indeed happening at that location, or disprove by providing, scientific reasons, such as, oh, by the way, you have a Faraday cage in this area because of the high EMF or whatever.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah. But the other thing that I think would be good to note is that uh, uh, th- I don't think you want to investigate by yourself. I mean, you want to have at least one other person there because there needs to be some sort of corroboration of whatever is being observed. Would you
I
agree?
agree, 100%. Yeah, and I'd even say 3 is best. I don't think necessarily 2 is even good enough. I think you still have the propensity for like a group think kind of situation. So having 3 at the minimum and 5 is probably the best. I would say for like a really good crew. You don't want any more than that because then there's just too much. I think of um, the poisoning, the evidence.
Right,
There's just sort of too many people around. But yeah, definitely having folks around with varied viewpoints and different skill sets, I think
right,
is another important thing. So you might have somebody who, they I mean they don't want to go into those rooms, but they're good at sitting and watching the screens for something
right,
that you might miss, right? Or
right.
they're good at the technical aspect of it, but maybe not want to get into it. Or the people who do want to get into it who aren't good at the some of the technical stuff. So having a good group of folks, I'd say 5 is probably about the best with the different abilities that they can get into, and then like reviewing the data. That's a whole separate thing. But I think if we're just getting into it, like having a good group with various skills and abilities is the way to go.
Certainly, in a group situation, it's especially when somebody is experiencing something, to have one or two or more observers
Yep.
that could corroborate whatever the person might be feeling, or observe what also observe what the other person is observing is good. And I think one of the ghost hunting 101s that I came to learn, uh both from watching the ghost hunter show as well as our own experiences, is that if I experience something like, or if I hear a sound, and Mac, if you happen to be there, I wouldn't go, "Hey Mac, did you just hear that tap tap sound?" I would go, "Hey Mac, did you just hear a sound?" And if you said yes, then I would say, "What sound did you hear?" Like in my head, I heard it to be a tap tap tap. And if you said, "Well, I heard a tap tap tap," then we just corroborated. But I didn't lead
Right.
you on to with the I don't know, with the suggestion of what you might have heard. And I think there's some of the maybe poor investigations, I don't mean that bad, but is when
There's certain
the
shows that do
people,
that too.
yeah, when the people kind of like lead the other investigators
Yeah.
to kind of like to say, "Hey, yeah, I also saw a white lady." And more like, it's more like when if you see something, you say, "Hey, I think I saw something there. Did you see that too? Did you see something too?" And if you said yes, and say, "What did you see?" And just kind of like,
Right.
getting that more of a, getting the descriptions to match. And if they don't match, then you can investigate further.
Yeah, I think that's something that the early ghost hunters did pretty well is they kind of just, hey, did you hear that? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, what did you hear? Like, I heard this. Oh, yeah, that's what I heard. Right. So without the leading questions of like saying already, sort of like pre loading those
Right.
questions.
Like, did you
Uh,
did you hear the water dripping? Like, that would not be the right
yeah,
question
that's
to
not the
ask.
way to do it, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think even for us, I think a lot of those noises, a lot of people don't recognize, or maybe they do. Like where I live right now, I hear stuff in the house, but I know it's just the house settling, or it's just like a noise. It's like it doesn't repeat. It doesn't. It's not like going oh, it's nothing like that. So
Yeah.
you just got to get used to those kind of things and realize that those things are going to happen. But if there's something that is repeatable, right? It's something that you can say, okay, all right, what'd you hear? Well, I heard this. Oh, okay. I heard that too. Does it happen again? And what does it sound like? And sort of
Right.
examining that. It doesn't necessarily prove anything, but at least you can work on some sort of premise, which I
Right.
think is really important.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, especially since we go into places that we're not familiar with at all, we don't know what the sounds,
Yeah.
that happen
Are
there that
normal
are
for that
normal.
area. Yeah.
Exactly. And some of them we potentially could find out during the baseline walkthrough, right? And if we happen to hear a sound, and then it repeats in a certain interval, then we'll have that in mind during the investigation, so we're not thrown off by it.
But another thing I think that kind of that one-on-one comes into is like listening to and looking at what you don't see and hear at the particular moment, right? So there comes in that investigation afterwards
Right.
is really reviewing the footage, and you can catch a lot. I mean, I think we've caught some stuff that is pretty interesting in the past that you just can't see with your naked eye, right? It's only comes to like the IR footage,
Right.
or there's
Infrared.
the infrared, yeah, the infrared, or the electronic or the digital recordings,
Right.
right, where you hear those
EVPs.
EVPs. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
and EVPs have been recorded on a non-digital format back going back to the
Oh
40s
yeah.
and the 30s.
On
Uh,
tape.
well, on vinyl or
On
oil or
vinyl.
whatever the hell they made it
Yeah.
by by that point. But recording of monks and listening to other things that sort of interject themselves into it, and so sort of the EVPs are really critical, and then looking at the IR recordings and really, that takes a lot of effort and a lot of patience.
Yeah, let's talk about time real quick since we're in that subject. So first of all, I think one of the I don't know, we followed it when we were in our investigation group. We would normally do our investigation during the witching hours, so to speak. So like between midnight and 3 o'clock in the morning. So that's
Right.
something to be mindful of. So for those of you who might want to get into this, it is not a daytime, it's not a day job. I mean, this is
Nope.
you have your day job and then you do your paranormal investigation, unless you happen to have
A
lucky enough to
TV
have a
show
TV show,
on Sci-Fi
and that's your
Channel back in
job.
the day. Yeah, yeah.
But even those guys, I mean, investigate during the evening. So I would say, that's kind of like whether it's true or not, that's kind of the witching hour appears to be, when because there's less traffic noise, there's less outside influence that could potentially contaminate the data capture, right? Whether it's video or audio. So
Yeah.
and we also make sure that if at all possible, especially if it's a client's home, the client's not there. They're somewhere
They got
else.
to be gone. Yeah, they're
They
going to
got to be gone.
interfere. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Um,
I think that for residual hauntings, it could mean more on the time of day when something may have happened. Um,
True.
versus
Yeah.
like an intelligent haunting, which can happen anytime. But maybe at that, it's been kind of shown through, again, not like pure pseudoscience, fine, whatever, but that witching hour is definitely true when that usually does happen, and it's not just because it's dark. It's not just because of it, there are other reasons behind it that maybe we don't know about, but certainly proven, I think, in my mind, that certain things do happen during those times. It's not just for TV purposes. So, going in there and kind of getting into that and that sort of thing, I would say, and maybe you said this in a very similar way, but um, I didn't, even in some of the places where I thought I was really tough and weren't going to be afraid. You're in the middle of the dark and you're hearing stuff. It's always good to have someone else with you. I think you said that kind of in a certain way, but having that other person there not only just sort of confirms things, but also makes you feel a little bit more comfortable so
hmm
that you can focus on what's important and not just be like, oh shit, I'm in the middle of an area where, there's nobody else around for about 5 minutes and it's kind of freaky and kind of creepy.
I think the scenarios that I felt comfortable being in an area by myself, especially if it was called for, is when I've got an IR camera also pointed at me that's being monitored in another at
That's
command
true.
central. So
Right,
that
right.
so in that sense, I'm never alone, so to speak. I've got somebody else who's watching my back in that sense, because sometimes maybe a particular paranormal uh, phenomenon that we've been told about could be brought on by having only one person in that area, right? So
Right.
that there's you know but again, if there's another way to corroborate the experience, it's definitely preferable. And I want to go back real quick to the client not being there. There are situations where it's the client may be the one who's bringing on the experiences um, inadvertently. And so
Right.
in those
Right.
situations, and obviously with the client's permission, the client could be used as kind of like, I don't know, ghost bait, for lack of a better term, so that if if they're there and if things happen to happen, it's because they're there. But obviously, in those situations, you would want to make sure that the client knows the rules. Like they can't be freaking out, and they can't be doing anything to taint the investigation.
Yeah, and I think that's something that you can kind of glean from a good interview with the
Yeah.
client as well. It's like, okay, when is this happening? What's going on? Why do you think it's, or why is it happening? And looking at the some of the patterns and the trends. But I think even more important than that, when we go into places that we've been, is to really make sure to do our best in every situation that nothing attaches to us
Oh yeah.
and follows us out, because I'm a firm believer in that. It's like, I don't want this in my life. If it's there, I mean, it sort of depends on, right, like on who it is and what they got going on, but you don't know. And I know it seems ridiculous. There's been lots of movies about it, but I don't like Ouija boards. I don't like the idea of doing things that invite spirits into your home.
Right.
I
Right.
think that's a bad policy, and I think that's been proven around the world in a lot of different stories that are not bullshit, and in people that we know, and things that you've seen and heard. I think it's just don't do that. So a cleansing is really important going out, but certainly even with that mindset going in, I think is really clear. It's like,
Oh
hey,
yeah.
we're not fucking around here.
I think with our group, we were fortunate to have a couple of members um, who know about that stuff, and I think we did like a um, I don't know, a spell or some sort of prayer in the beginning. Not a
Yeah.
prayer, but some sort of like incantation, so to speak. Like we're surrounding ourselves with light, blah 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 blah. I don't even know what the we used to have a script for it. And then at the end, to your point, we would say, we would kind of like warn, you're not welcomed into my car, you're not welcomed into my life, you're not welcomed. And whether it's more of a self-assuring type of scenario, it helps. And I remember you know, convincing myself one time that something followed me home because I forgot to do my cleansing chant at the end. So I guess it's
Right.
one of those things
Well,
where you don't want to have that as a hang up,
yeah.
when you're doing an investigation.
And I tend to believe that most spirits that are around they're not evil. They're just, they're stuck for whatever reason they're having to deal with. The difference is, are there demons or spirits of more power that has been around for longer, whether, like, whatever you want to call that, right? And so for those, I mean, I've had dreams occasionally of like physically and mentally trying to repel a demon before. And so it felt really real in the moment. And I felt like, it's like, I even was thinking about in the dream, was like, well, this is what I know about this. I should try this to get rid of it. And it always works at the end of the day, I think, unless I'm a demon, but I'm pretty sure that it hasn't done anything like that. So, I guess it all sort of really depends on your point of view. But I think anything that you can do to not invite that activity, especially if you're afraid of it, don't do any of that stuff. That's
And
101.
yeah, and again, Mac mentioned it earlier, but the part of ghost hunting 101, of course, is also realizing that you do have the responsibility of reviewing hours of video footage, hours of audio recordings,
Yep.
multiple ones even. And we had I think in our group we had a tech guy, and I think that was one of his responsibilities. It's not fun. It's not fun at all. But I guess the quote unquote the reward is if you
Yes,
happen
that
to
nugget of gold. Yep.
yeah, you happen
Yep.
to happen to find the needle in that haystack, type of, whether it's an EVP or electronic voice phenomena, or some sort of video anomaly that could not be explained at all. And again, during the review, it's good to have like a second look, second opinions type of thing. Hey, Here's, why don't you listen to this, or why don't you look at this? What do you see? What do you hear? And
Yeah.
if if that person who's listening or viewing happens to hear or see the same thing that you did, then that's potentially something, and that's potentially something that we could present to the client.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like accepting that there is that kind of work, and also accepting that probably 90%, 95% of the time you're not finding anything.
I would say 99% of the time you're not finding
Probably,
anything.
I was trying to be nice to anybody who wanted to start doing it
Hey,
again,
let's
but
get real here. I mean, we
yeah,
went through it.
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like finding evidence is few and far between, but when you do, it's the most amazing experience I think that you can have in a lot of ways. And I certainly hope people will try and do what they can to do it. Anybody who watches this, any of the two or three people watching it will actually maybe consider it. And I would like to do it again as well, but I don't feel like, it's something I have to do. I kind of believe in it anyway. So it's just something I have to convince myself of, if that makes any sense. I kind of feel like it is a reality in my own mind, and that's fine. And nobody has to believe me.
I think we may have to revisit this at another time if, for like ghost hunting 102,
20201 is the
201,
next one.
or however it works. But
Absolutely.
if you enjoy this content, folks, please give it a like and share it across your socials to help get the word out about our show. If you hadn't already done so, please subscribe. And on YouTube, hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss out on future episodes. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.